I was one of the Native American children, adopted at birth and removed from our country's Indian reservation system. I was raised in a small middle-class farming community, but was never told of my true American Indian heritage. It was still taboo back in those early days. The years passed, and in 1987 I lost both parents. While going through their personal belongings, my wife discovered my adoption papers and she began a search. 5 years later, I was reunited with my biological Lakota family living on the lower Brule Sioux Indian Reservation of South Dakota. I am a son of two mothers and a product of two worlds that had collided. But I have an equal amount of love and pride for both. I'm Paul LaRoche, and the stories you are about to see are an attempt to share this true American story of a hidden heritage. The following song setup was recorded at a live show during our 3-year residency at the RFD TV Theater in Branson, Missouri. Because of the amount of time that we had to refine and tweak the Brule show in Branson, many of the songs were presented as vignettes, combining music, dance, and storytelling. We found it helpful to set up each song presented during the various shows with a short anecdote. The audience enjoyed it so much that it became a permanent part of the show from that point on. Following is an introduction by dancer Gary Coons and the story behind the Brule song, Dakota Rainstorm.
Agichita Giyan Hoshila Chante Washte Nape Chiyuzapalo. Friends and relatives, ladies and gentlemen, in my first language of the Lakota, I said I greet you with an open heart and a hearty handshake. And at this time, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to introduce a man who has a remarkable story to tell you and a journey that he's currently on. And to share a little piece of his heart with you folks, let's bring him in with a big round of applause to the founder of Brule. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Paul LaRoche.
Thank you, Garen. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Well, I was one of the Native American children who was adopted at birth and removed from our country's reservation system. Now, as fate would have it, I wound up in the loving care of two very beautiful and wonderful parents, and I grew up as part of a small, white, middle-class farming community in southwest Minnesota. Well, I have the best of memories as a young boy. If there was a twist in the story, it's just this. I was never told of my true Native American heritage. That also was something that was taboo back in those younger days. You see, those times have all changed, and now many families openly seek out that part of their genealogy. But sadly, in many cases, that information has been discarded and left behind with past generations. And so we have a hard time these days, our generation, finding that information out. Well, I was told I was adopted, and I was told I was French-Canadian. Both true. They just left out the bigger piece of the puzzle. And the years went by. At the age of 32 in 1987, I lost both of my wonderful adoptive parents in the same year. And it was then that my wife, Kathy, while going through my parents' belongings, discovered an envelope. It had been hidden for years. And in the envelope was a little information about the adoption that had taken place years earlier. Well, she went to work with that information, I believe, following her intuition, her seventh direction, allowing me time for the grieving and the healing process. 5 years passed, and 2 weeks before Thanksgiving of 1993, I received a phone call out of the blue one evening, and on the other end of the line was a gentleman who introduced himself as my biological brother. His first words to me, in fact, were, "Hey, bro, you are Lakota." And we went on to exchange our life stories. Neither of us had known that the other had existed all those years. At the close of the conversation, he said something that was to forever change the course of destiny for my family and I. He simply said, "Come on home, come on home." It didn't take us long to pack up our things and leave Minneapolis behind, heading west, once again following my wife's intuition. The homecoming, to say it was a wonderful and joyous homecoming, yes, but that still falls way short. In fact, it's kind of defied description to this day. We've had a hard time describing what it's like to overnight, instantly, in the blink of an eye, to become part of another culture, another family, and another world. 5 days after that first reunion, we came back to our homes in Minneapolis and tried to adjust to life in the regular world. It was almost impossible. Well, I sat down with a friend of mine, both of us struggling songwriters, and we tried to write a little song, perhaps hoping to capture the events of that weekend. And I remember something that a friend of mine had told me about songwriting. He said, you just need 3 chords and the truth, and you'll do just fine. We put that philosophy to work, and a few hours later, we had a song that we called Dakota Rainstorm. It sat around in the can for 17 years without really having an application or a home until we came to Branson. We found a place for this song. We'd like to perform it for you this evening, if we may. We call this song Dakota Rainstorm.
It's been years since she's departed. You were 10 when she passed on. She was lovely, she was lonely, and I'll show you where she's buried. Right next to your father here, the same place they were married. Oh, God.